Hello friends, I am Dr. Varunendra Singh Rawat. I teach zoology in Hindu College, University of Delhi. Currently, I am dealing with these particular topics in the subject of aquatic biology, which is a GE paper in the syllabus of Delhi University. So basically, right now I am dealing with freshwater ecosystems. I have already talked about lakes and rivers. Now in this lecture, I will be talking about wetlands and how wetlands are important to us, in what significant way they affect the geomorphology of the region, and how they can affect communities and why they should be preserved. So when we talk of wetlands, not many of us know about the existence of wetland, what exactly wetlands mean. So the aim of this particular lecture would be to talk about what exactly constitutes a wetland, which particular regions can be assigned the name wetland, what are the different types of wetlands, and what is the importance of wetlands to humans as well as to the wildlife, and what are the current threats or dangers being faced by the wetlands from the humans. So the objective, learning objective for this particular lecture would be that after this particular lecture, you should be able to tell what are the different types of wetlands, what are the characteristics of these wetlands, what type of flora and fauna can be found in these wetlands, and what measures are being taken to preserve these precious wetlands, and how basically they are important to us. So this particular, I'll start my lecture with this particular picture, which basically shows a wetland, and as we can see, this picture basically describes a region which can be termed as wetland. And why it can be termed as wetland? Because you can see there is water there. So this water can be present throughout the year, or it can be present for most of the part of the river. But the basic thing is that the land is inundated or submerged in water. So no land is visible to us directly, and thus this region can be termed as a wetland. So defining wetland, what constitutes a wetland, what are the wetland biomes? The wetland biomes are those regions which consist of any body of water that stands still and lies low. So this particular body of water is standing still, it has inundated a particular region, and the level of this particular water body is not very high. The water level is not too much. Like lakes are also more or less static, though there is continuous movement in the big lakes. There are waves and continuous movement, but they are more or less static, whereas in wetlands there is no such movement, and the depth of water is not very high, whereas in lakes usually the depth is quite high. So the water level of these wetlands continues to vary throughout the year. It also depends on the surrounding region, the precipitation, the inflow of water from rivers. So the level might not be same throughout the year. Sometimes it might be very high, and at other times it might be very low. But one important characteristic is that wetlands are always found in terrestrial region. They are always found on the land, never on the sea, and they basically act as a barrier between land and water. They are mostly found in regions between the sea, oceans, and the pure terrestrial region. Now, what are the different types of wetlands? The wetland biome includes swamps, bogs, and marshes. And these wetlands, basically how they are important for us, because they serve as a reservoir for excessive rainfall to prevent flooding. If there is excessive rainfall, then they sort of act as a bowl or a reservoir which catches the excess rainfall, so that there is no flooding and the human communities are not subjected to any such disaster of flooding. Now these wetlands are present throughout the earth, throughout the world, on each of the continent except the continent of Antarctica. And these wetlands, they could be fresh water, they could be brine, they could be salty water, or it could be a mixture of two. Okay. Now these wetlands, I'll be basically talking about freshwater wetland, but because this is the freshwater ecosystem, but I'll add a dash of the saltwater wetlands also, because it will be better to talk about them in continuation with the wetland, not as a separate topic. So freshwater wetlands basically are covered with freshwater, of course, and they are covered with freshwater for most of the part of the year. Now they are identified based on the level of the water they are carrying, the type of soil they are having, the hydric soil, that is the soils which can assimilate or which can absorb more and more amount of water, and also the type of vegetation. So, these are the three criteria which help us in deciding which type of wetland we are talking about: the level of water, the type of soil, and also the type of vegetation. Now, these soils which are found in wetland, they remain wet throughout the year or for the most part of the year, and because of the accumulation of water, the soil becomes quite poor in oxygen. So, only those animal species and only those plant species can survive there which can tolerate low levels of oxygen. Any species which requires higher amount of oxygen, it cannot survive in wetland. So, that means wetlands has species which are specific to this particular biome, and they can survive only these species can survive there. So, they are more or less endemic here, and again it becomes very important for us to preserve these species because they cannot survive anywhere else, and because these plant species are specific to this region, they also support animal life which is also very specific. So, if a wetland is no more in existence, that means all the plant which it carried, all the species which it had, and all the animal species which it had will go extinct. So, we need to protect the wetlands. Now, the plants which are found in wetland, they are hydrophilic, that means they are adapted to grow in moist conditions, that is soil which is very wet and also little oxygen. So, the regions is having wet soil, too much of moisture, also the oxygen is very less, and these are specific plants which can grow here. These wetlands they serve very important function, and they are also needed to protect our land and water resources, because they improve the water quality of lakes, reservoirs and rivers. How do they improve the water quality? Because when the water comes into these wetlands, the velocity is quite less, so that it discharges or it releases all the load here. So, whatever load was being carried by water previously, whether it was soil, whether it was any pollutant, it will be released into the wetland, and the water which flows out of wetland, it is sort of filtered or purified. So, in this manner they help to improve the water quality of the particular region, and we can utilize that water in a better way, because these act as a filter which absorb the whatever pollutant is being carried by the water which enters them. Also, if there is excess water in the region, if there is excess precipitation, if the river is carrying too much of water because of the rains in the mountains, then these wetlands will absorb, or they will try to hold as much water as possible, and they will reduce the impact of flooding, and in turn it will help to protect the farms, the residential area, schools, college and urban area from damage of flood. Apart from this, the wetlands, they are very important because they provide feeding ground and spawning ground for a large variety of fish. Wetlands are very rich in nutrients, so they support large number of plants. Because there are a large number of plants, also a number of species of fish can be found here, and they feed here on insects and other organisms which live here. Also, they come here to lay eggs for protection. Also, it is home for number of native species and also migratory species, which mostly include birds. Also, these wetlands, the vegetation which is present here, it is a very important sink for carbon. The wetlands can trap about 50 times more carbon than the normal tropical forest. So, we can see the importance of wetland here, that it can trap such a large amount of carbon, and going by the current scenario of the global warming, we can see that what important role wetlands can play if they are preserved properly. Also, wetlands, whenever they are occurring near the sea, they help in buffering the shorelines against erosion, so that the sea waves do not erode the shoreline. Whenever there are wetlands, the sea cannot invade further into the land, and land will not be eroded. So, now coming to different types of wetlands, there are many types of freshwater wetlands. Basically, there are marshes, swamps, bogs and fens. Now, there are certain different characteristics with each of these wetlands, though the primary or the basic criteria is that all of them have stagnant water. Coming to marshes, these marshes are the regions which are frequently or continually inundated with water, that is, they are submerged in water. And the specific feature of marshes is that they are characterized by emerging soft stem vegetation. That means the vegetation which is having stem which is quite soft, and it moves up from the water level, emergent, it is emerging from the water, and it is adapted to the soil condition which is saturated, which is having too much of moisture. Now, these marshes, all of them receive water either from rivers, that is surface water, or some of them might also receive water from ground. That is, if the ground level, water level is too high, then that particular water will seep out and it will be present in on the surface level in the marshes, but most of them are fed by rivers. These regions or these biomes, marshes, they are very nutrient rich because there are a number of nutrients which are brought by the rivers or the surface drainage here. pH is usually neutral in marshes, and it leads to abundance of plant life, and because there is abundant plant species present here, animal life is also abundant in marshes. Now, there are a number of different kind of marshes which range from prairie potholes in America to Everglades. The marshes could be found in the coastal region, they could be found in the inland region, they could be freshwater or they could be saltwater. Now, marshes play a very important role in our ecology because they help in recharging the groundwater supplies, and they also moderate the stream flow when they provide the water to streams. So, they are basically trying to these bodies basically moderate the stream flow, and they also help in recharging the groundwater. Whenever marshes are present in watershed, they also help to reduce the damage which is being caused by floods, because they slow the flow of the water and they also help in storing flood water. So, the damage by flood is reduced whenever marshes are present in a region. Because the water which moves through marshes moves at a very slow velocity, sediment gets deposited, pollutants get deposited, as I have told earlier also, and whatever vegetation is there and whatever microorganisms are there, they use the excess nutrients which are being deposited, and therefore, the growth of these particular organisms is very high, plants and microorganisms. And because all the nutrients and fertilizers are deposited here, it does not go further and it does not pollute the surface water further. And the water which comes out from the marshes, it can be quite cleaner in terms of these particular pollutants. Now, the marshes could be tidal or not tidal. Tidal marshes basically are near the oceans, of course, and they can be found alongside the protected coastlines in the middle latitude as well as in the higher latitudes of the world. Now, some of them might be having a greater amount of fresh water, but most of them are brackish. Brackish means a salinity between fresh water and the sea water, salt water, and some of them are saline, but all of them are influenced in one fashion or another by the motion of ocean tides. So, the existence of these tidal marshes is dependent on the occurrence of tides in the ocean, and what level of salinity is there, that depends on the amount of fresh water being brought in and the amount of salt water which is coming in these marshes. These particular tidal marshes, they are categorized in two zones, distinct zones, the lower intertidal marsh and the upper or higher marsh. So, lower or intertidal marsh is more or less it is subjected to more of tidal incurrence, tidal change in volume of in the level of sea, whereas upper or high marsh is less subjected to such changes. Now, these tidal marshes, they again serve many important functions. What are the different important functions they serve? They buffer the stormy seas, the waves, the storms which are created in the seas. They can basically rush inside and they can cause erosion of the land, but if the marshes are present alongside the coastline, they will stop these waves and storms, and thus they buffer the stormy seas. They also slow shoreline erosion. Because of the existence of vegetation, the erosion does not occur at a fast pace, and whatever excess nutrients are being brought by the surface drainage, it is absorbed here before they reach oceans and estuaries. Whatever pollutants or nitrogen or phosphorus is being brought by the rivers, it will be trapped here, so that oceans also do not get polluted by these pollutants. Now these regions are also very important for providing food and habitat for a number of species of organisms like mollusks, clams, crabs, juvenile fishes, etc. And they also provide shelter and nesting sites for a number of species of invertebrates, fishes as well as migratory birds. So these regions are very important because there are specific species of animals which can be found here only and nowhere else, because they are the sites where nutrient is quite high in amount or variety and quantity. Also number of sheltered species are also very high. Now what has been happening to these tidal marshes is, with the increase in human population, more and more wetlands are being converted for human use. Coastal development is occurring at a very fast pace, and because of this there is continuous loss of tidal marshes. We can see this in our country in Mumbai. So more and more marshes are being captured by human agency, and these marshes are being filled in, and herein are being built community centers or whatever, schools and residential building. So this basically leads to a problem, because if there are no trees, or there is no vegetation, there will be more flooding, there will be more chances of occurring of storms or waves which can come inside, and there will also be more pollution near the urban area. So if there is a threat to these ecosystem, it should be countered with. If there is actually threat, I should not say if, there is a threat to these ecosystem, and it is essential that these tidal marshes should not be reclaimed for building human habitation. Other type of marshes are non-tidal marshes. Non-tidal marshes are mostly freshwater marshes because they are far away from the coastline, though some can be brackish or alkaline depending on the soil type and the content of the soil, the salt content of the soil. Now they usually occur along the streams and are found in poorly drained depressions where the water is not drained properly and the water is shallow, and they are basically alongside rivers, lakes and ponds. The water level in these wetlands vary from few inches to 2 or 3 feet depending on the season, or it might also vary from marsh to marsh. Now some marshes like prairie potholes may periodically dry out completely. So some marshes might dry out completely in some season and then get filled up with water again. Now these marshes have very high levels of nutrients, and these marshes are one of the most productive ecosystems on earth. Naturally also they are very high level in nutrient, but nowadays because of human input also the nutrient level has increased significantly, but naturally also they used to be very high in nutrient. These marshes can sustain a large number of species of plants, and again because of presence of large variety of species of plants, the variety of animals is also very high. In addition to providing habitat to these animal and plant species, they also help in reducing the damage which can be caused by flood and in filtering excess nutrient which is being brought by the surface runoff water. These marshes also have suffered major losses due to human development because they have been degraded by excessive deposits of nutrients, that is pollutants and sediments which come from construction activity of humans as well as farming. Severe flooding and nutrient deposition occurs in downstream water if the marshes have been degraded or destructed completely. So if in a particular region a non-tidal marsh has been filled up or has been degraded, then the consequences are being borne by the regions which are living downstream of that particular marsh. These marshes, they have highly organic, there is a high amount of organic matter. The minerals are very rich in these soils, and a number of species of plants like lily, cattails, reed and bulrushes can be found here. Also can be found small mammals and birds like red-winged blackbirds, waterfowl, great blue herons and animals like muskrats. Now some example of non-tidal marshes are prairie potholes, playa lakes, vernal pools and wet meadows. So this is an example of picture of how a non-tidal marsh looks like. Another very important type of wetland is swamp. A swamp is basically an area of land which is permanently saturated or filled with water, and How it differs from marshes is that it is characterized by domination of woody plants. Whereas marshes could be filled with water for most of the time of the year. Sometimes they might get dried also, but swamps are always filled with water throughout the year. Also, the vegetation which was in marshes, that was soft stemmed vegetation, but in swamps the vegetation which is found is woody vegetation. There are two main types of swamps: freshwater swamps and saltwater swamps. Now, freshwater swamps, as the name suggests, they are formed around lakes and streams and they contain fresh water. Rains and seasonal flooding in these swamps lead to fluctuation in water, but they always have some or very less or more amount of water. Now, the soil which are wet in these swamps, it is an ideal ground for growth of vegetation which is water tolerant, and it helps to maintain a moist swampy condition. Now, some of the swamps which are famous historically are found in the Middle East region, ranging from the region where Nile river exists towards the region where Euphrates and Tigris river flow in the region of modern day Iraq. So, this particular region has also been termed as Fertile Crescent. Now, this particular region is full of water because of the rivers, and there are too many water bodies, wetlands, marshes and swamps are present here. This region has been termed as Fertile Crescent because this is the region where first of all agriculture was taken up by modern humans, and the first civilization came into existence of modern civilization. So, because this region was very rich in water and it had such a large variety of wild plants that humans could think of cultivating or taking up agriculture for sustained supply of food grains. So, we can see how the existence of marshes and swamps basically decided the course of history of human evolution and evolution of agriculture in the olden times. Now, coming to other type of swamp which are saltwater swamps, they are usually found near the tropical coastline, and they are formed when there are bare flats or regions of mud and sand which are thinly covered by seawater only during high tide. Later plants which can tolerate tidal flooding and specific type of trees like mangrove trees, they come here, they start growing and they start forming roots so that the soil could be held here, and these trees then keep on growing and they form mangrove regions here, mangrove forest basically, and the roots of these trees anchor the sand and other sediment, and later on can come a large number of species. These regions are very fertile regions and they support a large number of animal species also. They are also termed as nurseries of water because a large number of species of fish come here to lay eggs and large number of invertebrate also come here to spawn. So, that is why they are also known as nurseries of the ocean. These are how the saltwater swamps of mangrove forest look like, and we can see Sundarban Delta, Sundarban region has a large area which is covered by these saltwater swamps or mangrove forest. Another type of wetland which comes into a focus is bogs. Now, these bogs are basically wetlands which accumulate peat, PEAT, a deposit of dead plant material. So, herein what exactly happens is the plants which are growing in these regions, they die and they start accumulating because these these bogs are usually found in regions where the temperatures are less. So, the decomposition of dead plant material is not very fast. So, this keeps on occurring. Most of them are mosses, and majority is the organic material is being built up by sphagnum moss. Now, these bogs are quite low in nutrient and they mostly contain acidic water because the degradation is not complete of the organic matter. This water becomes quite acidic, and because it's not organic matter is not degraded completely, the nutrients are not released back in soil. So, they are nutrient poor. Other names for bogs include mire, quagmire and muskeg. We must have heard of the term quagmire or dal, which is known in Hindi. Whatever goes there, it basically it gets stuck there. So, that is another name of bog. Now, the gradual accumulation of the decayed plant material, more or less act like a carbon sink. So it can help in basically reducing the greenhouse effect. And when any of the region, like if the bog starts filling in, then basically it is we can say that it is one of the stages in the succession of lake. As the lake starts getting filled in by sediment, then one of the stage will be bog stage, after which this particular region will be converted to land and there will not be any more lake found here. Now these are widely distributed throughout the cold temperate regions, mostly in the boreal ecosystem in the northern hemisphere. The largest wetland which is found, largest bog which is found in the world is in the western Siberian lowland, which covers more than 1 million square kilometers. So we can see the expanse of bogs which occur in the colder region of Siberia. Now one example of succession which can be seen in wetland is the activity, how the activity of beaver leads to conversion of these wetlands into land. So beavers they basically cut trees using their sharp teeth and they build dams, which leads to diversion of the streams and creation of ponds. Now in this pond there is standing water which also seeps into the ground, and as the water stands here, more and more plants come to colonize this particular region, and a number of animal species also start coming here. Now because of the formation of dams, the river is trapped here, the sedimentation starts coming, sedimentation starts occurring, more and more sediments come here, so that with the passage of time this particular region starts getting filled up with sediment. And when that happens, then later on it gets converted to land region. Now another very important wetland is fens. These are different from bogs in the sense that they do not receive their water supply from groundwater from the rainfall. They receive their supply either from the runoff or groundwater. Rainfall does not supply fens. Now these fens are characterized by water which is pH neutral or alkaline, and basically there is high amount of dissolved mineral found in the water of the fens, and also the nutrient levels are very less here. So these fens are usually dominated by plants which can live in such condition, nutrient less conditions, like grasses and sedges like Scorpidium. Now one important thing which has been done to preserve wetland, because wetlands have been degraded to a very large extent, and continual human activity of construction is decreasing the area covered by wetland day by day. So a convention has been formed which is known as Ramsar Convention, which is basically an international treaty for protection of wetland. It was established more than 40 years ago, and today there are more than 2000 wetlands which come under protection of Ramsar Convention, and 476,000 acre is being conserved by under this particular treaty. Now these wetlands, what threats they face? They face threat of pollution, climate change, construction of dams, agriculture, aquaculture and development, and if they continue to face these threats, then the cities will face more threat. They will have to spend more money to treat water for the citizens. There will be more floods in the regions, and it will be devastating for the communities. There will be more storms, there will be more hurricanes which can penetrate farther inland, which will lead to death of animals as well as humans. So if we want to ensure that these things or these calamities do not happen, we have to ensure that the wetlands are preserved and protected by the effort of the civil society as well as of the government. Thank you.